Okay, so the subject of the presentation today is fractal geometry and architecture. And the reason I chose rather in a hurry to talk about this subject is this one. This person, Benoit Mandelbrot, a mathematician who actually coined the word fractal, died on this day, October 14th, but not this year, in 2010, I think. So it is an important name, Benoit Mandelbrot. He was born in Poland, but then he, together with his family, they immigrated to France, and then, you know, he arrived in the United States. He's considered a maverick. The translation of the word maverick is kind of like a motherless calf. You know, someone you cannot truly pin down, you know, in a way, an adventurer in the field of spirit or culture or a certain discipline. He was a polymath, so he had several interests, not just, you know, specifically in mathematics. Anyway, let me read a few things about him. So Benoit Mandelbrot was a Polish-born French-American mathematician and polymath with broad interest in the practical sciences, especially regarding what he labeled the art of roughness. I love these words very much, and I will try to explain a little bit later why. A physical phenomena and the uncontrolled element in life. He referred to himself as a fractalist and is recognized for his contribution to the field of fractal geometry, which included coining the word fractal, as well as developing a theory of roughness and self-similarity in nature. Now, I do have to say that when I read that a mathematician, a scientist, had an interest in the art of roughness, I smile. Why do I smile? Because there is a wisdom here and an openness of the mind which impressed me. There was a very important architect, Lina Bobardi, born in Italy, but living later in and working in Brazil. And she wrote about what is roughness. And she admired more the stones in opposition to the diamonds. This is something not very common. Usually people are seduced by diamonds and not by stones. Well, she loved the roughness of the stones. And I have the feeling that Mandelbrot also somehow had a similar disposition of the mind, so to speak. Also, think about this. He also was interested in the uncontrolled element in life. Beautiful. Beautiful, because usually we think of scientists or mathematicians or people working, you know, in the practical sciences as he did, as people who want control, who want to measure, no? To measure everything through scientific methods. But he was attracted by the uncontrollable and the uncontrolled element in life, meaning change. You know, and I think if we have the wisdom and the openness to welcome actually what is not controlled by man, we discover a joy that usually we don't have. So yeah, I think together with Mandelbrot we should also become interested in roughness, but they are connected in roughness and the uncontrolled element in life, as he called it. This, of course, in a way humbles us, because human beings like to measure everything and to control everything. And roughness, well, escapes our need for Apollonian, measurements, if I can call them so. Roughness. What is roughness? What is rough? It could be uncomfortable, but there is truth in that roughness. Also, what is uncontrolled? Well, all in our lives we are daily almost, witnessing happenings which escape our human control. And I really think, facing the uncontrollable parts of life is a good thing, although it could be painful at times, like the pandemic now. But climate change, of course, also there are all kinds of things that tell us behave, tell us you, the human beings, are not the measure of all things. There are things in the world and in life and in nature which cannot be controlled by you, the human beings. Unfortunately, we like to think that we are the rulers of the world and all the rest. It is not so. It is not so. So the modesty that these words kind of suggest to us, the uncontrolled element in life, and even, thinking about roughness, I think is important to in a way to downgrade ourselves. Paradoxically, if we downgrade ourselves, the human beings, I think we gain something that actually upgrades us, maybe in the spiritual field, maybe in the mental field, maybe in the cultural field. Anyway, sorry for this digression, but I was stirred up by this short presentation about Benoit Mandelbrot. And in a way, this is fractal, because, fractality or fractalism, or I don't know how to call it, is exactly about this. It's about subverting, is about sabotaging the pyramidal structure of power. You fragment it. And this fragmentation is actually beneficial. It erodes, often very artificial hierarchies. So yeah, I would very much welcome what is called fractal in life and in culture. So this is what he says in the very well-known book by him, The Fractal Geometry of Nature. Clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, and bark is not smooth, nor does lightning travel in a straight line. I think this short fragment from Mandelbrot says a lot. Says about the unexpectedness of nature. Indeed, clouds are not spheres, mountains are not cones, coastlines are not circles, bark is not smooth, and lightning doesn't travel in a straight line. It is culture and the human reason which, in the name of controlling what is difficult to control, approximates the phenomena in this way, with spheres, with cones, with circles, with smoothness, because it's somehow in the human nature to try to smooth a little bit the roughness of life, and to control it essentially through reason, through measurements, through so-called order. We are afraid of disorder. I have to tell you, I was for 2 years a so-called artist in residence at an experimental school in the United States. And there was a scientist, an American scientist. Well, actually, he was a mathematician who coined a different word that is this chaos. You know, we have order and then we have disorder. But then we have chaos, but we don't have this chaos. So he created or invented or thought of the word this chaos. What could this chaos mean? Because it's order, but it's a different kind of order than the one depicted by the word order. So, you know, I invite you to think about this possible word, this chaos. Okay, and it is related actually to the subject of the talk today. It is. I don't think Mandelbrot thought of this word or knew this word, but it does connect in a way with the, recognizing, acknowledging the complexity of life and the complexity of nature, of the natural phenomena. And here I include also the inner natural phenomena, because when we talk about nature, usually we only think of the outer nature. This is what you, the people here, the students, study, horticulture, meaning the outer nature. But in my opinion, the inner nature, the psychological nature, is actually very similar to the outer nature. So, we try to control the outer nature through the means that humans invented. But what about the inner nature? We need a psychoanalyst, right? We need a psychologist for our inner troubles. Maybe we can talk about an inner horticulture. I'm just thinking aloud now. And maybe I'm thinking maybe in the future we would have horticulturalists who also study psychology. What about the inner landscape? In essence, this is what I'm trying to say. We have an outer landscape and we have an inner landscape. What about, again, I'm thinking aloud, an inner landscape architect? What about that? Anyway, I know I can be sometimes a little bit rough myself with my incursions into all kinds of a little bit provocative thoughts, but I'm just asking questions. Now, this person, who I don't know who he was, he wrote about Mandelbrot, and he says the name Mandelbrot and the word mandala for a religious symbol, which I'm sure is a pure coincidence, but indeed the Mandelbrot set does seem to contain an enormous number of mandalas. I suggest to you to search on the web for the word mandala and also on Google Images, because mandalas were and still are in India mainly, or in Asia, maybe as a whole, but particularly in Southeast Asia and in India, mandala was, I don't know very well how to describe it, and I'm not an expert in this at all, but I always admired mandalas, and I regret now that I don't have in this particular presentation images of mandalas, except at the very end, kind of contemporary mandalas. But very old mandalas represent some kind of they are images of the universe in a way, of mental universe and the physical universe. Well, they say that making a mandala could also be therapeutic, and it's probably true because it has to do a lot with consciousness, with contemplation. They are in a way, a mandala is in a way an imago mundi, a graphic representation of mental landscape, if I can call it so. Now, indeed, there is this coincidence that Mandelbrot and mandala, the two words are, almost similar to an extent. And again, if I knew I had an audience composed of people who don't study actually architecture, extensively, I would have made the presentation differently. Even for architects, I would have made it differently if I had more time at my disposal. But enough with the excuses. I still hope I can provoke you or stir you up with some things about buildings, both past and present, which, in my opinion, fit into the field of what is called fractal geometry. For example, this building, which is in Australia, and it is a contemporary building. Of course, the more bourgeois, viewer would say, please be kind and turn off the microphone. I hear a background noise, unless you want to say something, because I don't read, I talk spontaneously, and although I don't pretend that I say only wise things, I need to be very intense and very careful. So any noise could imbalance me, if you are so kind. Please turn off the microphone, unless, again, you want to say something. Thank you. So, we look at this building and we say, what is this nonsense? What is this chaos within the perimeter line of the building? But in my opinion, the building says something about the present. It's in a way, on one hand, trying to bring the unpredictability, the uncontrolled element of life into the geometry of the prism. And we better acknowledge that uncontrollable element. On the other hand, is also about the realities of the virtual world, because now we have a multitude of perspectival points, so to speak. Reality is more complex. We are all connected in this web, the internet, the digital world. So it's a complex world we live in. Well, life was always complex, but in the present, we do have to acknowledge that the relationships we live in two different worlds at once: the physical, the concrete one, and also the virtual one. Also, I think such a building, fragmented as it is, fractal as it is, says something about the dynamics of the present, which cannot be any longer described properly through Cartesian systems and through excessive order and so on. But here I begin this presentation with some images from various times and various cultures having to do with fragmentation, with fractal, with what the fractal means. In Asia, you had temples which, in their plans, but not only in their plans, also in sections and elevations, are fractal, essentially. And this is like a mandala. This is, in a way, a mandala. Asia has a lot of wisdom, in my opinion, superior wisdom than the one possessed by the Europeans or Americans. Well, I'm talking about the Brave New World, not the Native American Indians. Those had the wisdom. Unfortunately, we didn't acknowledge it. But fractal art, and I will show also fractal architecture from the Gothic times, from the Middle Ages. The realities of a nature which is rough and uncontrolled and uncontrollable belong to life always, not just in the present, not in the present of this mathematician. He just, and in fact, he didn't take pride in inventing anything. He said, I just looked at what was there and, acknowledged it. And I think his modesty is very welcomed. Anyway, I am trying to say that the fractal is opposing the monolithic view of the world, and I think we need more fractals, more fragmentations, more erosions of the power structure. You know, it's I don't know. I think, was it Giordano Bruno who said the world is a sphere whose center is everywhere and whose periphery is nowhere? Maybe this was said by other people as well. But today I would say the opposite. The world is a sphere, or maybe not. Maybe I should stay away from the sphere. In fact, as Mandelbrot suggested, don't use the sphere, but for the sake of the discourse, let's say the world is a sphere whose periphery is everywhere and whose center is nowhere. How are we to live in a centerless world? I think those hungry of power and control have a hard time to accept this. But I always said we need the wisdom of the blade of grass. In fact, I even told you know, an architect who teaches here in Bucharest, I said to him, for me, the blade of grass is more important than the Parthenon. And he was astonished. And I said, yes, because the blade of grass is alive. It grows towards light. In the spring, the blade of grass breaks snow. It emerges, you know, announcing spring. It grows towards light. While the Parthenon, doesn't matter how sublime might be as a building, doesn't grow towards light. The Parthenon is not alive. I mean, it might be alive in our imagination, but literally it is not alive. It doesn't grow towards light, while the blade of grass, the most humble blade of grass grows towards light. So are we aware of this when we step on grass? That there is a small natural element, a part of nature that is alive. It is alive. Mysteriously, it is alive. And so I think the fractalization of the world, or acknowledging the fractal nature of the world, is a positive thing. And I would say even a necessary thing, you know, because unfortunately in our quest for ordering the events of our lives, we are obsessed too often by what I call the pyramidal power structure of society, of institutions, and so on. You know, we like to have a boss, we like to have you know, the triangular you know, crystallization of power, and we forget the multitude, the anonymous multitude, which is so important. By the way of this, I have to tell you, because there are here students from horticulture, I am tempted to ask you, is for you, unfortunately, I don't know the word in English for this particular tree. I will name it in Romanian. But I will ask the engineers in horticulture, is the oak, stejarul, more important than oțetarul? Because for me, in my opinion, they are both important. They are both alive. They are both, you know, born from you know, nature. No, something God made them. No, God made nature. So why is it that some people value the oak, stejarul, but they don't value oțetarul? I don't know how to call it in English, oțetarul. Maybe someone from you knows this. Anyway, but again, we are dealing with that mentality which thinks that the oak is important while a so-called lesser tree is less important. I don't think there are lesser trees. This is our projection of our minds, so willing to establish hierarchies and then evaluate the world in artificial ways. Anyway, this building we are going to look for later at is, I already showed an image of it, is a building in Melbourne, Australia, which is in its essence fractal. Right now it's just like an aide-memoire of the fractal, theme in architecture, relating to architecture. These are columns done through, parametric design by an interesting person who teaches at, is a researcher at ETH in Zurich. We are going to look more in detail at these works. So, you might be surprised because I show here works, architectural works that you probably, or some of you didn't see before, like these. These are done, it's kind of funny because he's bringing back the column in architecture, but this kind of column, which is fractured, is fractured. I mean, the fractal aspect of it is some kind of architectural embroidery, but it is sabotaging the classical column, the Doric column or Ionic or Corinthian. And I think it's a very interesting idea to bring back the column, but in this form. But we'll talk more about him, Michael Hansmeyer. Anyway, of course, this is done with the highest technology, with the scripting, programming, parametrics, and so on. It is, to me, it is actually a positive thing, the fact that we can marry a sensibility which is observing with kindness the mysteries of nature, the complexity of nature, and at the same time uses a very sophisticated, up-to-date technology. Both could complement each other. Now, there are all kinds of approximations of this theme, the fractal. You see here is the pyramid or the triangle, which is fragmented. I call it sometimes maybe in a maybe questionable way, the sabotaging the square is sabotaged. Here the circle is sabotaged through rotations. Here the triangle is sabotaged through envisioning smaller triangles within the larger triangle, and so on. It's literally about beneficial erosions, beneficial fragmentations. Well, this is a page with works done by actually by Peter Eisenman, an important contemporary architect who for a while at least advocated weakness in architecture. And since there are horticulture students here, I would say that the weakening of architecture could mean the strengthening of nature. We weaken architecture, but then we allow nature to come forward. This is why I say to architects often, maybe we should first design the garden and then design the house to match the garden. Usually it is done the other way around. We build a building, and then if we still have time and energy and maybe some money, we think of the garden. But what if we start with the garden, and then if indeed we cannot abstain from building buildings, think of the buildings to match the garden. Start with the garden. I think at this point in time in history, we need nature, we need ozone, we need the trees, we need the grass, we need the gardens more than the buildings. This is my belief. Now, from object to field, this is also an interesting, in a way, it's about, again, the fractalization of our perceptions and the fractalization of architecture, and maybe the fractalization of everything, from object to field. Because we think in, after the Enlightenment, and maybe even from before the Enlightenment, that everything is an object. We are obsessed with so-called objectivity, but we forget that we are actually dispersed in a universe which is indeed a field. For example, an important visionary and inventor, an architect, Buckminster Fuller, he said, we talk about the environment, but the environment is everything outside of us without us. So he preferred the word cosmos, because he said cosmos refers to everything outside of us plus us. So okay, we can use the word environment, but we should also be aware of the fact that we are part of the environment. We are not separated from the environment. We are part of the same field. We are not objects separated from what we call the environment. We are the environment itself. We are part of the field that the environment, the word environment refers to. So yeah, I believe, and this has to do with the fractalization of our perceptions, that we are not objects, we are part of a field, or fields even. Again, sorry about this page is upside down. So, we see here various attempts to, I use again this word, to sabotage, a simplistic understanding of life, of art, of culture. You remember what this mathematician said, that, the clouds are not spheres. That, that there is a risk of excessive simplification. So what we see here is this agitation provoked by the fact that fragmentation, yes, challenges a simplistic, understanding of whatever, a square, a circle. Within these perfect, absolute, and idealized, geometric figures, there is a multitude of events and things that we should acknowledge. And I believe, yes, we should acknowledge them. Again, I am improvising a discourse here, but I'm trying to make it as sincere and as intense as possible, and also to express myself clearly about a subject which is itself a field, and this, you cannot pin it down in a simplistic way, like 1 + 1 = 1 + 1. No. So I think, looking at nature and learning from nature, we can gain a complexity, a fractal complexity, which any tree has in the spring, when the leaves show up and the flowers show up, and that kind of impressionism that we see in nature should inform us as well, in my opinion. But you know, for the sake of controlling everything, we simplify. You know, we stay away from that roughness, which is difficult to measure, and we try to bring in abstract forms and so on. Modernity in general is notorious for attempting this, you know, in order to simplify all matters. We approximate with abstract figures something that is actually very complex, and yes, in essence, perhaps of a fractal nature. Most of the buildings of the past, you know, here is you know, a temple from Asia, from Southeast Asia, but you know, any building in the past, call it a cathedral or whatever, had, because it was built step by step, stone above stone, and also by a multitude of people and only some architects. Like, for example, the cathedrals were built sometimes, like Chartres Cathedral, not just by the experts, you know, the guild of builders, but also, you know, the populace, you know, women, children, older men, they all contributed to the growth of the cathedral, and that in itself was a celebration of the fractals of society. And I think if we are thinking in democratic terms, we should acknowledge the positive values of what we call the fractal. And yes, vis-a-vis God or the divinity, not just a Christian God, you know, any God, any divinity, vis-a-vis the divine, you know, the human being is actually a blade of grass, you know, metaphorically speaking. And the temple is erected by a multitude of blades of grass, if I am referring to the humans who erect them. Yes, they are celebrations of that unity that the divine, you know, advocates in a way, or exemplifies. But this unity, this whole, is actually formed of a multitude of fragments, those little fractals which matter. Anyway, these are just some images gathered together in a rather hurry, kind of an aide-memoire of what maybe, you know, the fractals are about. And then very soon you'll see examples of fractal architectures. This is, in a way, you know, explicitly kind of, you see here, we have the periphery, the circumference of the circle, which was maybe, could be approximated as a circle. But this is, I call it an embroidered configuration, that all the little parts, they have a role in this. And yes, it is a center, but there is also a periphery, and the periphery has the same level of complexity as the center, if not even more. So the relationship between the center and the periphery is you know, a complex one, and the dialectics are not of a, I don't know how to describe it, not of a, you know, it's not the pyramid of power here. Yes, in plan it is a center, and yes, it is a periphery, but I wouldn't, vertically speaking, I wouldn't call the periphery as being inferior in any way. No. This is a fragment from the building in
Mr. Coma, can I say something, if it is possible?
Please.
I think the most important thing about a fractal, it is that if you take a small piece from a structure, this small piece contains the whole information which you can find also in the big picture.
Yeah. Yes, please continue, Alina.
So if you study any part of a complex structure, when we are speaking about a fractalic structure, you can find the laws and the information which you can find anywhere. This is the most important part. That's why they say that in the microcosmos of a fractalic, you find the macrocosmos.
Yes, yes, please continue, yes.
And also, this fractalic concept is not to make a mimetic representation of the world, but it is about a synthetic one, a form of mimesis. In aesthetics, they speak about Darstellung and Vorstellung, not a copy of the reality, but a deep understanding of the structure of the universe, which you interpret in your architectural or in your art representation. I don't know if because of the using English, I don't know if I made myself clear, but I'm sure you understand and you can take my idea and put it better in words.
No, you said it very clearly, Alina, and I thank you. In essence, I try to say the same thing when I was talking about the inner landscape and the outer landscape, and about cosmos as opposed to environmentalism, that we are part of the field. What is inside is outside. What is small is big. The structure of the blade of grass, the reality of the blade of grass, the reality of the periphery is connected and similar with what is at the center, or so-called the peak. You are right. The smallest part contains within it all the so-called DNA of the whole and of the center. So even what is at the periphery, so-called periphery, is very similar and the good brother or sister of what is at the center. But you are completely right in what you said. But what do you do, for example, with this image, which is from a building, contemporary building in Melbourne, in Australia? Because here we see some kind of a neurotical fractalism. How do you explain it, Alina, or anyone here? How do you explain that today, and this building was built, very recently, is in this way? Because this is not that mandala that we were talking about earlier. This is something else. Because it seems to be disorganized, chaotic. How do you explain that such a building came into being? I will also show buildings from the past, which are different, which are ordered, not like this. Yet they both represent architectonic fractals. So again, I am asking you at this point, why do you think what we look at now was built in this way?
I have an explanation if it is
possible.
Please. Sometimes the complexity of the universe is very far from our power of representation. So if we take only a piece, maybe we cannot make the identification of the laws, but these mathematics laws can be very complex, so we cannot perceive the whole complexity. Can be a symbol of this complexity from my point of view.
Well, if I understood correctly, I mean, what we look at now represents some kind of a puzzlement or disarray. We don't believe any longer in the centrality of the mandala. It shows I think in a way, a crisis. It shows a crisis. This kind of you know, disordered crystallization, if I can call it so, is something unique in the culture of the world. And how do you explain it that is happening now, exactly now, when we have a very powerful technology at our disposal? We have countless books, we have access to any information. We have, in a way, we are at the peak of our development as a human species and as a society, and you know, in human history. And yet we arrive at this imbalanced, disordered, you know, manifestations. In a way, it seems to be a contradiction, no? The reason I mention this is because I don't know if you know, there was an Italian theoretician of culture, Giambattista Vico, who thought that the history of humankind takes place in cycles on the spiral of time, in 4 ages. The first one he thought was the age of the gods, then the age of the heroes, then the age of man, and the fourth one, the age of chaos. And he thought that after the age of chaos, the 4 cycles will start anew with the age of the gods, the age of the heroes, the age of men, and the age of chaos perhaps again. I feel, I don't know if I'm objective, but I feel that we are at the threshold now. We are at the apotheosis of man in the world. So we are still in the age of man, Anthropocene, and this is a manifestation of the last cycle, as Giambattista Vico saw it, where this is an illustration in a way of the age of chaos. But chaos is needed also. In fact, I don't think if we acknowledge chaos, we might be able to have a more appropriate perception and understanding of what order is. Order is not only what we think is order. There is, in fact, this was referred to even by this brilliant mathematician, that there is in the disorder, apparent disorder of nature, there is order. It's a more subtle order. It's not the order of our colonnades and, you know, our rows of Doric columns or whatever, or Cartesian obsession with, you know, highly controlled entities. No, but nature has a subtle, complex, deep order which takes the form even of disorder. So I think welcoming what might appear disorder is moving in the right direction. That's why I think this kind of architecture is actually necessary in an attempt to discover, to access a deeper understanding of what order might mean. Well, for example, here, this is from India. You know, here it's more easy for us to speak about order. You know, we understand it. But, you know, this kind of a conception of the universe or of our own lives is not any longer like this. And it's not because I think mainly what we miss is the centrality of faith. These people who built this had a very strong devotion to a religious system, to a form of faith that was for them unquestionable. In my opinion, we don't have it. We have this. We have disorientation. We are free. We are free, but we pay the price for that freedom with a lot of anxiety and with a lot of inability to crystallize our gestures the way the old people, the ancients, so to speak, did. And look at the temples. Again, we are dealing with the temple from Southeast Asia. Here, every part, the smallest part, contributes in a coherent way to the whole. This is not the case any longer. We don't believe in this kind because we don't have the cosmos of hope that faith offer to the people who build these temples. We don't build temples any longer. Even our cathedrals are very unconvincing. There are interesting cathedrals built by individuals, not by collectivities, not by, well, in Barcelona is an exception, but even there, the building was Sagrada Familia was started by an individual. Well, the city now in a beautiful way actually is continuing his work. So the collectiveness, the society is mobilizing itself to continue the work by Antoni Gaudí. In the past, society, you see each single part here represents that blade of grass, which metaphorically for me means the individual. They all contribute to the edifice in a coherent way, in an organized way. We don't believe any longer in something like this because we are fragmented. In a way, we are fractals ourselves. We fragmented ourselves incredibly. That's why we build in this way, or some of us build in this way. And in my opinion, for our time, this is telling the truth. It would be an untruth to mimic something like this because we don't have that the coagulation that faith brought to human beings. These people were united by the same faith. We don't have it. We have a multitude of beliefs. Some believe, some don't. We cannot build a temple today in this way, or we cannot build this kind of architecture. No, I don't think we can. Anyway, moving forward, we are rather at this stage in human history. I think we are rather somewhere here. You see, it's not explicit a center, it's not explicit a sense of order. Although there are attempts to recuperate some kind of a order centrality, and I'm going to show some examples, surprisingly, even from an architect like Zaha Hadid. Anyway, we are moving forward in this very complex and rich and puzzling subject. What is a fractal? In what way the fractals can inform our work? This kind of, centralized visual material makes me even a little bit uncomfortable, because just the other day I talked about Kisho Kurokawa, the Japanese architect who was against centers. How could you have order without a center? It's possible. I think it's possible, but we have to acknowledge deeper realities within, on one hand, human life and society, and on the other hand, in nature. Does nature have that, unquestionable center? Can we use our geometry to, symmetrically envision or express the realities of nature? Not really. Nature doesn't act in this way. It appears, rather, capricious, subjective. Nature doesn't use our geometry, Euclidean or otherwise. But there is order in nature. There is order, but it's a more subtle order than the order of our geometries. These temples were connected kind of with this this understanding of the world. You know, there is coherence, there is clarity, and we don't actually have, if we are to be honest about ourselves. That's why I think it's possible that Giambattista Vico was rather correct, and that we are now at the peak of the human power. We are also on the threshold of chaos. But look at this image from the Islamic world. This is a beautiful illustration of fractal art. And I'm going to show more examples, because truly the Islamic architecture is unbelievably convincing in testifying about the role of fractals in architecture. Here we have the periphery, here you have the center, and they coexist, and in ways which I think are very inviolable, and in abstract ways and in beautiful ways. But we'll come back to a specific chapter in this presentation about the Islamic art. Here again, Islamic architecture. But let's talk now about Toyo Ito and the Serpentine Gallery Pavilion from 2002. Toyo Ito is an important contemporary architect. He even received the Pritzker Prize. And let's look at this building. It is fragmented, and it is connected with what we call fractal art or fractal architecture. He takes the prism and then he cuts it. He fractalizes it, if I am to transform the word fractal into a verb. Look at the interior. It's the same attempt to acknowledge a complexity which an undisturbed prism does not acknowledge. So he cuts the prism. In a way, it's the prism of our Euclidean assumptions, or our no, maybe I should not mention Euclid now, but our Cartesian assumptions. You know, that everything is clean and serene and almost placidly so, that everything is controllable, and we can measure, we have right angles. Well, he's trying to agitate things here. He brings in, if I am to call it so, the age of chaos, or a different kind of order. It is about fragmentation. It is about fractals. This building was built in 2002. And we'll see another building by him, kind of similar. So, you know, you'd ask, why did he need to do this? Because I think he was attempting to tell the truth about our time. Our time is not placid. Our time cannot rely on predictable row of Doric columns. They simply don't work. He was attempting to tell the truth about our time, and our time, just like that building in Melbourne, is rather like this. You know, there are distortions, there are fragmentations, there are fractals that force us to acknowledge them. Look at the building. You know, you would say it's a building in a crisis. You know, it's yes, it is the crisis of a simplistic understanding of order, what order is. It is a fragmented building which is challenging us to reconsider our assumptions, and I think he does it very well. Now, the Sumika Pavilion, also by Toyo Ito, kind of similar. Now you look at the tree here, and you look at what Toyo Ito did here. You know, in a way, you know, these fragmentations, these fractals, even on the pavement approaching the building, try to connect with the uncontrolled, apparently uncontrolled manifestation of the tree. And I think it does so. I mean, look at this. In a way, this is a fragment, an abstracted fragment of the tree here. With our simplistic understanding of logic, we would expect here to have just verticals and horizontals, but that's not how the tree is it? Isn't it? Is it? So, you know, again, in this building, Toyo Ito is attempting to connect with nature, even if through abstract means, architectural means, but to bring something of the uncontrollability of nature into the building. And this is also not very new. I mean, you know, in the Gothic times, we see the ceilings of old cathedrals, which are not very dissimilar. And I'm going to show also examples from both, you know, medieval European buildings and also from Islam. This ceiling, this roof is acknowledging the complexity of the world and the complexity of nature. He tries to bring it into the building. He is not happy with just imagining or building, you know, a serene, placid, totally so-called rational prism. No, no, and that's why Toyo Ito did here something truthful to his time, in my opinion. Now, I know that this kind of architecture is rather unusual for those who are educated and raised in a climate of predictability, and if I was malicious, I would have said placidity. In a way, he is sabotaging the supremacy of the human order. And he's problematizing the, you know, the pyramidal hierarchical structure. And I think he does. You see, this is what God did with the tree, and this is what Toyo Ito did with his building. You know, and look at this. I mean, how could we have, you know, if we look at this tree, which is ordered, but the appearance seems to be, you know, rather capricious or aleatory. He's trying to connect somehow with the tree in this way. You know, you could say he didn't succeed, or you could say this is crazy, or this is neurotical, or no. I think he is correctly sabotaging the placidity of the white or not so white prism with these fragmentations, these fractals. And this is the role of the fractals. The fractals refuse to accept, you know, the predictability of artificial systems, What am I saying? Artificial systems. A system is by necessity, by definition, artificial. I think these two works by Toyo Ito are a good example of what fractals can do in order to reverse or at least sabotage existing power structures. He also designed this bench here, which itself is could be a subject for discussion, because you see there are these rounded parts which are actually not, they are a little bit, you know, carved into the wood. So, you know, you might say they might be uncomfortable. Well, yes, but, you know, this bench probably is it tells a truth which the so-called very comfortable and, you know, smooth, you know, common so-called bench it doesn't do. It's the same attempt actually to fragment, to sabotage, to problematize, and to even bring to a certain level of discomfort, which actually is whispering a truth that perhaps is needed to be whispered. It's in a way a quest for complexity, to acknowledge the complexity not just of nature but of human life, and such a system, if we are to call it so, might appear to be irrational, but is life only rational? I think in good measure it is not. Anyway, now we go to a different architect, the Gothic builder, the master builder who built the Gothic cathedrals. So we are in a different time, almost, let's say 800 years earlier. And look, this is different from Toyo Ito, because at that time, again, there was the centrality of faith, and people truly believed in God, and there were no doubting. There was no doubting. There was this architectural expression of their unshakable faith. These people lived modestly. They lived anonymously. They didn't sign their buildings. The building was the house of God, and the ceiling showed it. Look here, you have complexity, you have fractals, but it's not of a chaotic nature. There is complexity, but there is also symmetry. This is transparent for the spirit. It's an above which is mysterious and which is complex, but is not disordered, is not disorganized, is not chaotic. And I love this picture of a Gothic cathedral, and even the stained glass windows, even they are fractals. The narrative, the story is being told, bidimensionally on glass through many fragments. In fact, a very stained glass window is made of many parts, many little parts, many fragments, as opposed to our modern glass wall or whatever, the huge window, which is made of just one single piece of glass, where there are no fractals, there are no fragments. And look at the ceiling, it's magnificent, but it's organized, it's ordered. There is complexity, there are parts and the whole, they are both present, but they all coexist in a coherent way. So very different from, let's say, what we saw by Toyo Ito. And yet, in my opinion, the truth of the Gothic cathedral is not actually, higher of the truth of Toyo Ito's buildings. In fact, if there is truth, one is not higher than the other. They are both true. Toyo Ito was true to our time. The Gothic builders were true to their time. Yes, here we have fractals, clearly. Why did the Gothic builders imagine and build this building in this way, and not just with a banal white flat roof or ceiling? Why? Well, because we are here dealing with a forest of columns and with an understanding. I mean, I imagine that the Gothic builders, if they didn't have the knowledge, they had the intuition of the mystery of the above, of the mystery of God, towards whom they had reverence. They revered it. And this ceiling shows reverence, where we don't have the same relationship with the above. No. There is fragmentation here. There are fractals, but very different from what we saw with Toyo Ito. And not just Toyo Ito. We are going to see other examples. I love the Gothic. I love the Gothic cathedrals, but I also love the you know, the buildings from other parts of the world and other religions. And I also love the works of modernity, of contemporaneity, which are true to the time they were built in. So this is from approximately, let's say, 800 years ago. Now Zaha Hadid, after the Gothic times, we come back to the present, the Morpheus Hotel, which she built. And look at this, you know, it's almost Gothic. You know, it's through the contemporary means of parametric design, they built this. It's a hotel, it's not a cathedral. You know, this we could discuss about, because yes, we live at a time when we don't build cathedrals like this, but we build hotels like this. And Zaha Hadid, you know, I don't know if consciously or explicitly thought of fractal geometries, but we have here a clear example of exactly that, fractal geometries, or exactly this. And I think it's beautiful. Now, I regret a little bit that it is a hotel, and probably a very expensive hotel. I wish was some kind of a, you know, building searching for an unknown god, for the birth of a new or unknown god. In a way it is, but the function is mundane because our age is about that, you know, but the architecture is splendidly fractal. You do have to acknowledge it. The exterior also expresses something of the interior. Look at this, you know, fractalization of the body of the building. This could not have been done without the newest technologies. You see here labyrinthine structure. The structure becomes ornamental and the ornament becomes structural. This is also sabotaging the simplistic old paradigm, you know, with columns and beams and verticals and horizontals and nothing else. Here we have a different kind of aesthetic, a different kind of building, but this building, I think, in a very obvious way, illustrates, you know, the fractals, because this is the subject of our meeting today. Bravo to Zaha Hadid architects, and those who do not acknowledge her are wrong, because even if maybe not all her works are equally good, but this one I think is an interesting work, and it does connect. We just saw previously the Gothic cathedral, and now we see this work by Zaha Hadid, which aesthetically, at least, if not functionally, is not very dissimilar. You know, in contemporary terms, she's saying kind of the same thing. So on the left, we see the model image, and on the right, the real image. I mean, the way the building was built. How can you build something like this without using fully the newest tools of the present? You can't. You can't even draw it. But not only it was drawn, it was built. And this is during the construction. The engineering was also magnificent. You have to confess. This is impossible to do, absolutely impossible, by manual means. And it was done, it was built. Bravo to them. Now, Michael Hansmeyer, an interesting man in Switzerland at ETH, an important, very important architecture school in Zurich. He's a researcher there. Here you see it at the conference, having behind him images of fractals. And here we see some of the work he does. These are 3D printed, and they are generated, of course, digitally. You see, we don't have any longer the placid, round, white column. Here, the column is embroidered, is complex, is fragmented, is fractal. And again, the reappearance of the ornament is fundamental, something we are still far away from understanding. The ornament is coming back, isn't it? I mean, we are talking here about a rather young, still young architect. Well, he was a banker initially, but anyway, he is acknowledged, he is known, he builds, and look what he does. Could we say that structure doesn't need the ornament? Well, that's not what he says, does it? This is highly ornamental. And in fact, the ornament is not possible in the absence of the fractal, in the absence of the small part that composes the whole. You know, this is an embroidered architecture, impossible to conceive with, simplistic or traditional means. He needed high technology in order to generate this and to build it. It looks fantastic. No, yes, it is fantastic, but it is fantastic exactly because he decomposed the Cartesian assumptions, and he recomposed them from a multitude, innumerable fractals. But even this is not really new. I mean, the means are new, but there are Hindu temples which are very similar to what we look here at. These are generated with the help of digital technology, but as it has been said, nothing is truly new under the sun. In certain respects, it is so. These are still done by Michael Hansmeyer. So this might surprise you, of course, because we are accustomed to a type of aesthetics which is very simplistic. You know, we have the vertical column, and then we have the horizontal beam, and that's it. Well, it's not so simple, as you can see, and in fact, you saw it even in the Gothic cathedral, and you are going to see it also in beautiful, beautiful examples of the Islamic art of building. Look at what Michael Hansmeyer does. You know, complexity is coming back. At times it seems tormented and tormenting, but he's whispering the truth of our own time, and it is a quest for that truth. And in this sense, I think we should appreciate his effort and his accomplishments. In a way, we could say that the fractals are the ornaments of nature. Now, Islamic architecture, which is superlative in this field, look at what these people built. You know, how did they do it? They didn't have computers, they didn't have parametrics, they didn't have scripting and programming. How did they do it? They must have been incredible mathematicians, geometers. They handled, I mean, this is the translation from a square plane to roundness through these progressive fragmentations. In my opinion, is incredible, and I think no one can deny their obvious superlative beauty. And then there are so many buildings like this. Really, in comparison with them, in my opinion, we are primitives. The way we build is so simplistic that indeed we need a mathematician to remind us about that complexity he referred to when he invented the word fractal. Here we see these, common people, so-called common people, although no one is truly common. We are all complex and mysteries to ourselves and others, working very intensely and very passionately towards this field, because it's a field. You know, this little figure here, you might call it an object, but it's actually part of a field. And these people, you know, are intensely working to, you know, generate a beautiful field of geometric configurations, which is done from fragments, from fractals. And in 3 dimensions, look what they built. This must be known and this must be discussed, because this is an art we don't have any longer. We simply do not have. Why? Because we are in a hurry to rush back home and turn on the TV and watch some nonsense from HBO or whatever. Usually a crime, a rape, something scandalous, a lot of killings, of course, with rifles and all kinds of machineries. These people didn't have TVs. They build these things. Do we have something like this today? Well, we have Zaha Hadid, we have a few other architects, we have Toyo Ito, we have the heroes of the present. But as a whole, in my opinion, we don't build things of a similar complexity. Look at this. I mean, this is not Lego. This is not Bjarke Ingels. This is Islamic art, which arrived at a complexity we can't even imagine. Look at this, built. This is not, you know, done on Photoshop. This is built with concrete, real materials, and it's splendid. And I think no one could deny it. There is a whole and there is the part, and there is no contradiction between the part and the whole. As Alina said, the part reflects the whole and the whole reflects the past, the part. They belong to the same universe, in this case, the built universe built by man. Look at this splendid top part of an Islamic building. Isn't it beautiful? I think it is. How did they do it? You know, and why were they not happy to just have a flat roof with a so-called terrace on it, terrace jardin? No, because this was honoring the divine. This was honoring the above. It had to be splendid, like a splendid coiffure of someone. You know, every single part here contributes to the whole in a magnificent and yet modest way. This incredible coexistence and collaboration moves me beyond measure. We cannot do something like this today. We can't. And if we are to be true to ourselves, we probably have to build kind of like Toyo Ito suggested, and Zaha Hadid as well. Although in that work, in the Morpheus Hotel by Zaha Hadid, there are some kind of insinuations or there is an inference towards, perhaps towards, but still far away, very far away, towards something like this, or something like this, or something like this. And not just the bidimensionality of the images on the walls, but also the crystallization in 3 dimensions here is amazing. They are amazing. And they are done without scripting and programming, without digital technologies, without everything we have. But they had something which we don't have. That is faith. Look at this. This is an imago mundi. This is there is everything here. There is the blade of grass and there is God. There is centrality and there is periphery. There is geometry and the dissolution of geometry through fractals. And it's just a small fragment from an Islamic building. Look at this here. Even here, you know, bidimensional and in literal terms, is still about fragmentation and fractals. Fractals. And, you know, you can have geometry and you can have this, as I call it, fragmentation. And there is they collaborate, they coexist. It's possible, as you can see here. you might say, you know, this is losing one's time, because we think in these vulgar terms that time is money. Time is not money. For these people who build these beauties, these beautiful things, for them time was not money. Our life and our time is so vulgar and so cheap. You know, we think that time is money. For these people, time was God. Is you know, they totally gave their lives to build what we looked at. You know, they did these things with a conception which was diametrically opposed to ours. No builder who did something like this would have thought that time is money. No, impossible. So do you understand the immense distance between the builders of these buildings and us? We reduced even the cosmic power of time to the banality of time, of money. It's incredible. I keep coming back to that beautiful short poem by Charles Baudelaire, L'étranger, the stranger, when someone asked the poet, do you like God? God, meaning gold, meaning money. And he says, I hate it in as much as you hate God. So Charles Baudelaire understood that money and God are dichotomically opposed. But this is not what we think. We think actually that money is God and God is money. And time is money, because when you say time is money, you actually say God is money. That this is incredible, actually. You know, it's I think we are blind. That's all I can say. That's why we cannot create such things today. We can't. Yes, individuals like Zaha Hadid and a few others attempt something, but here is a collective art. This is the great difference. Yes, any office of architecture has a number of people there, you know, 10 or 400, but this is beyond the measurableness of how many people work. This represents the architectonic coagulation, crystallization of a faith that everybody shared. Something like this today we can't do. We can't. And look at this. It's complexity. There is a system in a way, but this system is not simplistically Cartesian. It's not, certainly not built on the assumption that time is money. It's something else. This is true faith, and true faith generated such buildings, and they are magnificent. I don't think there is anyone who would say they are not. They are magnificent. And look how man ascends towards God. And God is not arrogantly present there in the center. No, it's rather discreetly so. I think it's very beautiful what they built. And everything, even the smallest incision on the wall contributes to the whole. Bravo to them. They are in my opinion, very moving, these builders. They didn't think of going to Mars, okay? They didn't think of escaping the Earth, running away from the Earth on the moon or on Mars. No, they, plus they also didn't run on the highway with the countless cars as we do. We run and run and run because for us, time is money. Well, for them, it was not like that. Time was God. And God was the opposite of money. Although, of course, there were, you know, there was money then too, but I don't think those who truly had true faith in their hearts believed that time is money or that God is money. No, no way. No way. This was about beauty. This was about idealization. This was about believing that life is worth living in only in as much as one contributes to building the house of God. Doesn't matter, you know, to what religion you belong. Here we are talking about Islam. In the Middle Ages in Europe, we talked about the Gothic cathedral, but But essentially, both European cathedral and the Oriental, buildings, or the Middle East, or whatever the religion, it was about acknowledging the complexity and the roundness, in a way, of the world. I don't belong to this religion, but I respond to the universal beauty of these buildings. And look at the modest quarters of the people. I see fractals here as well, and also fractals that seem to want to sing the same song, and that is the song of beauty. This song, architectonic song, and here is the human hand of the craftsman, because this work was done by the human hands, not the robots. Was done by the human hands, like this one. Even when eroded by time, the building still is beautiful, I think. Even in fragments, even in fractals, it is beautiful, because the fractals testify about the whole, which was, is, and will be beautiful even if eroded or fragmented. Great works. They are divine. They are done by human beings, but with the human hand, but they are divine. Look at this. Look at this cupola. Look. Why did they do it like this? It's truly for the glory of God, as Johann Sebastian Bach was signing his musical scores, with the three initials of the word Soli Deo Deus Gloria, for the glory of God. This is what we see here as well. This was built for the glory of God, something we don't do these days. We don't. That's why no architect signs his plans with the three initials, S, D, G. Magnificent work. Bravo to them. I mean, even the light seems to enjoy, the light came from far away in order to reach this interior. Now I'm beginning to talk a little bit like in the messianic way of Louis Kahn, that I feel like saying now that the light made the effort to come from very far away from the sun in order to enter this room, this space, attracted by its beauty. Then look here, what can I say? Our so-called terrace jardin really is very vulgar by comparison, very banal. Anyway, moving forward, in our presentation will end soon. It's literally a sketch, but maybe we can amplify it together and talk again about this subject. Look at this, it's, how did they do it? And it's not on a flat surface. How did they do it? How did they coordinate all the parts? Look in this embroidered hole where every part is contributing to this symphonic work, and you cannot remove any, because they belong to the whole, but they belong to the whole in a I have to say, not in an obliged way. I don't know how to put it. Look at this. It's a structured universe. It's an ordered universe. It is governed by a divinity. It doesn't really matter very much how we name that divinity. These people believed, they had faith. Alhambra also, there was this embroidered kind of architecture where the fractals come together to create a symphonic work. This one is maybe a little, less. I mean, the sacrality of the gestures is not so obvious, but it's still about the stalactites and stalagmites of fragmentation and fractalization. I prefer, older models like this one. Truly, try to imagine what the builder who did this and the artist who did this felt and thought. Again and again, I'm absolutely sure that none of them would have thought that time is money. No, they took their time, in as much as, a woman needs 9 months to give birth, approximately 9 months. Well, in order for the son to be born properly, well, here also this needed time, you cannot cheat on time. I have to rush because there is this murder series on HBO, which I have to watch. No, you do it with a different kind of understanding of what your role in life is. Maybe I'm idealizing these people, but how could I not idealize them when I contemplate their work? Look at this. Just look at this. I come back to Dostoevsky. Beauty will save the world. And those who think that the ornament has nothing to do with architecture in the present are totally wrong. I mean, look at this. If you remove the ornament, what do you get? Well, you cannot remove the ornament from the history of architecture. If you remove the ornament from the history of architecture, you will not have any longer the history of architecture. There will be no history any longer. Why it takes us so long to realize this, I don't know. We are still stuck into a very primitive and early conception about modernity. Because I kept saying, even Miss van der Rohe used ornaments, the natural ornaments of marble in the Barcelona pavilion, and so did Adolf Loos. You employing also, and he wrote against the ornament, but he was wrong. Look here. Now we come back to that building that I showed at first, the Melbourne's Federation Square, done by the Lab Architecture Studio. And please keep in mind these buildings. And now we look at the end of this presentation at what Melbourne Federation Square is this building. And you will say, this is nonsense, this is chaotic, but this is telling the truth about our time. And as such, I welcome it. We cannot build like those people in the past if we are to be true to our time. We saw this already, and what can I say? There is some kind of an anxious beauty here as well. If you are inclined to agree with Confucius that beauty is everywhere, but unfortunately not everybody has eyes to see it. In my opinion, there is beauty here too, but a different kind of beauty from the one we just saw in the Islamic art of building. This is saying something about us today. And as such, I think we have to accept it and even applaud it. It's maybe some kind of a physical architectonic representation of the spider's web. No? But it's still an art of relationships. All parts are related, but in a conflictual way, in a dramatic way, not in the organized way of the buildings that we just saw from the past. Look, it's a different reality, the one we live in. But it still has to do with fractals, with fragmentations, with many parts almost desperately trying to cling to each other, to connect with each other. There is a level of, you might call despair in a way. It is as if the architects are attempting to say, we still want to connect with each other, to desperately so. There is some anxiety here that we have to acknowledge it, and it's the anxiety of our time. Because we don't have that centrality of faith that, people centuries ago had. We don't. And this is actually, I had to develop more this section, is a fragment from Louis Sullivan, of an important building he built in Chicago, where also there is ornamentation, where there is also fragmentation, and there are fractals. I want to develop this particular part of the presentation, but I didn't do it yet. Anyway, this is in a way the father of, well, one of the fathers of the modern office tower and the tall building, the one who said form follows function. But as you can see here is, you could almost say that function follows form, that he was highly concerned with ornaments and imagined an incredible, almost hallucinatory kind of ornamentation. The same man who wrote form follows function. Now I end this imperfect and incipient, this introduction in a way, some kind of prolegomen on the subject, the fractals, with fractal mandalas of contemporary times. I will just show some images of mandalas visualized in the present and having to do with fractals, because the name of the mathematician that we paid homage to today, his name was close to mandala. I thought of ending this presentation with mandalas, and here they are. In my opinion, I mean, these are individual works done by individuals. These are not done like in the Islamic architecture by a group of people or a collectivity, but they represent some kind of a nostalgia. They also connect somehow with the world of dreams, with psychedelic manifestations, because dreams, even if we are very so-called rational human beings, dreams continue to exist. And mandalas, in a way, try to connect the concreteness of life as lived with a less obvious reality of dreams. And this is what we see here, in a graphic way, of course, and done by individuals, various individuals, but it's the same attempt to visualize a universe which is more complex than the simple addition of individual parts. In other words, 1 + 1 + 1 is more than 1 + 1 + 1. So you have the whole and you have the part, and they sing together the same song, if I am to express myself maybe in a rather naive way. Okay, so these are just some bidimensional works done digitally, representing some kind of mandalas, which in their own way do not say no to what is called fractals. That's it. Eu vă mulțumesc.
Thank you very much. Thank you.